Good afternoon, this is Untitled Channel on Education. Every day we hear and students tell us how dissatisfied they are from the educational system. So, what is it that goes wrong about education? Is there anything wrong about it at all? A lot has been said, a lot has been written, and the main factors that people point out are mainly go around lack of relevancy or a poor test focused system, teacher burnout, teachers not being motivated, students not being motivated, failure to keep up with technological issues. These are only some of the problems, few of the problems. There are more probably, but there are also solutions. So today we're going to discuss, that's an exciting debate always, about education with Rob Wiley in Barcelona,
Hi
Carlos
guys.
Fung, and Graham Bell in Malaga. My name is
Hi.
Radmila Gurkova, so let's get started. So the first question, guys, is there anything wrong about education as students conceive it, as students know it so far?
Anything wrong about education? Well, what do they think about it? Well, it depends on their expectations and their experience, I think.
Yeah.
If they're used to a school system where you have a one teacher and 20 students, and that's what they're expecting that we provide, then
Maybe.
Have you had students that thought that? I mean, have you gone
So-
to a class or had a new student and they've expected you to sort of write on a board and yeah?
Absolutely.
And what's their reaction when you kind of explain that we don't do that?
They're actually more relieved because sometimes they expect that there's more pressure, there's some testing involved,
Yeah.
and if we're doing it the way we do it, they're more relaxed. They learn faster, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Graham, I know it's there is not an easy cure, but what is needed to embrace a change in education?
Oof. I mean, well, there's big systems involved in education. Those are hard to change as one entity. So, I mean, I guess it's about collaborative working. We're never going to achieve anything as one voice on our own. But I guess that's the benefit of what we do here in Xfinity. We all are a mixed bag of different techniques and styles of teaching. And we're all kind of pushing the same direction to try give ourselves that ability to, that availability to express ourselves as teachers. I interviewed a guy the other day, and he was a drama student, and he taught drama, and he felt restricted in schools because he couldn't teach his style. And I felt for him, and I was like, okay, well, we need to get together as a group to make sure that we can offer this diversity of teaching and not be so trained to not do what we want to do,
Yeah.
Mm.
Actually, you mentioned some keywords here. Whenever we talk about traditional education, we have in mind a certain system. You say that there are alternatives, but people have to agree on the characteristics of this system so that actually change can happen. Okay, so I'm going to quote one of our teachers here who wrote an amazing blog post. His name is Hannes, and he wrote about the difficulties of learning. So he opens his blog post with these words: we constantly hear that learning must be uncomfortable in order to succeed. And it's true, people kind of relate learning to something difficult, but do you guys agree? Does it have to be that way?
If we're talking about uncomfortable in terms of difficulty,
Mhm.
no.
No.
No. No.
Why
No,
is-
no, no. No,
Okay.
short answer, no.
No.
It doesn't have to be difficult. No, I
No.
think you can still learn.
Yeah. But why is
Really
it
easy.
learning associated so much with something uncomfortable?
Well, it's because of the school
That's what I was
system.
going to say. Is it because you
It's
think back to
because,
our school days and you
right.
think, oh, I remember sitting in a class and copying dates in a history class, and kind of we always think back to that maybe. So you have kind of better memories from
And
that.
there's
sort of.
pressure with homework, and there's
Yeah.
pressure with tests
Yeah.
and quizzes and finals. Those things, some people thrive in that environment, but most people don't like it.
Yeah.
Most people don't like it. So I mean, they're Graham, what were you thinking?
No, I totally agree with you. People don't like the process of learning, so we address how we teach them. I think a lot of people have to sacrifice time, to sacrifice their schedule to learn, and we force them sometimes as teachers into a certain zone. But if we can approach and teach them in their lifestyle, to fit into their routines, then it doesn't become uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
But oddly enough, sometimes students are kind of surprised by the fact that we are not assigning them homework. So they feel that they need to necessarily do some homework in order to see progress. What do you guys tell these students?
Well, as far as homework is concerned, we have the application. So I always tell students if they want to review, because I don't call it homework, I call it more of a review. If they want to review, they can go back to the application and go through all the activities and review the vocabulary, review the grammar. So they can do it on their own time in the metro,
when
whatever.
they're commuting, right? It's good that they can go back and sort of look again at a text maybe we have studied in class and you know have another read in their own time a couple of days later, or the game that we have on the app as well is a good way. I've got students who play it, like you say, when they're commuting into work, they do it. So yeah, but yeah, I don't like to call it homework either.
I don't call it homework, I call it review.
I have had students where after the first class with them kind of looked at me and said, okay, so what's our homework for next class? And then they've been a bit surprised, you know, when I've said...
Was that a teenager or another?
No, adults as well, yeah, because maybe they've always associated the learning, okay, you go to class, you learn, and then you've got this homework that will be done and then corrected for the next class, etc., etc. So I think, you know, if you've spent your whole life learning and studying in that way, then when you come to a new system like ours, then it's a bit of a strange thing at the beginning, but then they get it.
Right, so the expectations, no? The expectations that they get a piece of paper with a homework to do and work after
if you've never known any different, then...
Exactly. So having the application is an excellent solution for those people. They need something, well, here you are. Review all you want, whenever you want, at your convenience.
Actually, I now remember that some people really need to feel that they have a pen in their hand. Because if they're not writing, they think that they're not learning. Is this just an illusion, or that's a reality from your experience?
Well, there is studies that say that you have to actually have the physical movement of your hand to memorize. So there is studies that say you need to write in order to remember.
You mean if I need to remember something, you mean write it?
Write it, but the actual practice of writing, it helps you memorize, helps you remember. Not just mentally, but the actual physical activity. So I have a number of my students have picked a piece of paper and a pen and they write words.
Do they read these words afterwards?
That's the question, isn't it?
No, they but be surprised. Some of them do it.
Some of them do.
I think it depends a lot on the student, right? Sorry, Graham.
Yeah, I saw I saw a very similar what Carlos is talking about. It said how at university they don't push the importance of why we write essays, and it's because it's part of the thought process. When we physically move our hand, it actually forces us to think. But I guess for me, that is one thing with learning. But for me, the thing I find with students is I want to force talk.
Yeah.
So I'm always saying to guys, get out there, go to an intercambio. Whatever you've learnt with this hour you've done with me in this class, please go and practice it, so that it's fluent next time I see you.
Yeah.
Actually, yes.
I was going to say the same. I could write something. I'm personally speaking, but I could write something maybe 100 times and I would not remember it. But maybe if I've used it 5 times in half an hour, then I'm not likely to remember it and use it. So
definitely.
Yeah, I think it's different with languages, Rob. I think so.
Yeah, it all depends on the student. You know, in how they learn. I mean, we all learn differently.
I think that we learn by impact.
Yeah.
When whatever impacts us stays there. Anyways, going back to Hannes' article, because it's really useful. Actually, he talks about former tennis coach called Tim Galway, who created the inner game technique, and he said, in sports, I had to learn how to teach less so that more could be learned. Is that not a paradox? How do you understand that, guys?
Well, it's our method really is talking, and you know, our method is we want the student to talk more, and we assist. We are helping them learn by them doing the speaking. So this actually applies to our method.
Because learning actually happens for every single person individually. They learn. Therefore, the idea of learning being uncomfortable is absolutely makes no sense if we take this approach. Okay, so the primary role of the teacher, that coach says, is to facilitate and motivate rather than train and educate. Instructions are still important, but they should help, not lead. I think this is a very good reflection.
And it's exactly like Carlos said, it's exactly what we're aiming to do here, and we're not going to sit there and dictate to a class. We want them speaking and them kind of leading the class, and with it just, as to moderate what's going on, to correct.
Okay, so there is another characteristic of traditional learning as we know it, or traditional education as we know it, which is a system based on tests and scores rather than competences and outcomes. So is this not obsolete? Do we have to stick to it, or there is an alternative? I mean, needless to say, we don't apply that, but why have we chosen it in the first place?
Why have we chosen not to do that? Well, I mean, I think I mentioned in the last talk or a couple of talks ago, about how typically in school, the objective is, like you say, so you study something, you remember it, you pass an exam, and then more often than not, you forget it, right?
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is the whole sort of teaching depending on the situation, so functions, or whether you need it for traveling or for an interview or whatever. I think it helps you remember more. I don't know if schools aren't going in that direction or yet, are they, or have they started to?
There are some projects that definitely even here, yes, in Barcelona, with early child education, we have these new approaches. Yes.
And do you think that's something that will
definitely
be growing?
I
think
believe
so. No?
I believe so.
I think people kind of woken up to the idea.
We have to lead by example.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So how do we measure progress in English learning if not with tests then?
Well, we do it. Go ahead, Graham.
No, I was going to say, how do you measure progress? As a teacher, it's measuring their ability to produce whatever you're teaching them, and seeing their fluency. I mean, the whole point of modern teaching is that you work with small groups. So you should be able to remember where your students are at, and you should be able to know and do kind of formative assessments as you go along. Regarding the students' perception of how well they're doing, that's our feedback. And I think that's how we should be testing and growing the language, rather than you got an A plus or you got a C or you failed this. Just positive feedback, and then us being able to see by looking at a syllabus and following it how well they're progressing. And that for me is how we test, not exams. I hate those.
Yeah, I'm with you, Graham. I hate exams.
Right. In addition, I like it a lot when students are able to use a new phrase or a new word in different situations. So it's not just in the one situation that they learn in the lesson, but apply it in different situations. And sometimes they're correct, sometimes they're wrong, and we correct that. But most of the times it's going to be okay. So that's how I know if they're progressing myself, because I can tell, okay, they're using this in different scenarios. Does it apply? Does it work? And if it doesn't, then I can correct and say, well, it doesn't apply in this section, in this area, but it applies in this area. No? So that's how
I've had some. No, I love that. I totally agree with us. I really amusing and funny, and there's a couple of times where students have used, I can't think of an example, but they've used an expression in the wrong way, and I've been like, that works, I actually like it, I'm going to start doing it. It's not how we would use it.
Right.
I love it. They have just that they're just, if you have a good relationship with your student, they're not scared to fail, so they just try stuff, and it's in that communicative environment where they really get to play around with English, and that's where they learn, not with testing and outcomes. No.
Especially when it's very phrasal verbs and idioms are very difficult to learn for somebody who's not native. So having that time to test and try different areas and different examples, that's how I know. Okay, this is working. They understand the concept and they're trying to apply it in different areas of language. So, yep.
It's great. It's how they develop humor as well. That's how English it's taking things out of context and applying situations and laughing.
Yeah.
It's
Very true.
cool.
Graham, you mentioned formative assessment. Can you quickly explain what is formative assessment for those who may not be aware of it?
Yep, sure. It's just as you're going through finishing every class, you're seeing where they're at. You're getting an opinion of what they need to learn, what they know already, and you're allowing that to form how you teach.
Excellent.
You then how you apply parts of syllabus, what you select for them. I mean, with our kind of structure and our vocabulary activities, our intro questions are kind of a formative assessment at the start, so we can see how much we have to teach and how much we don't. So
Excellent.
formative assessments through a lot of our material. Summative, not so much, thankfully.
Excellent. I think we have some comments.
Lots of questions and comments today, actually. So, Patricia has asked about, we mentioned a little bit about, sort of the traditional blackboard, whiteboard, etc. She says, so some students want you to explain them the grammar structures in a traditional way on the whiteboard so they can take their notes. We've all had it, right? She admits that she's used it from time to time, but personally she prefers not to abuse it too much. How good, bad do we think they are? Is there anything positive to doing that?
Well,
I think. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Carlos,
no,
you go.
I think it depends on your student. If the student learns faster, appreciates the fact that you take 2 minutes to write on a whiteboard a list of vocabulary words, then go ahead, do it. But we don't need it per se. But if there's a whiteboard and I get feedback that they like it, I will be more than happy to get up there and use it.
But is it not again something that okay, we are helping students, probably we think that we're helping them because when writing we bring clarity, but in fact I think that there is another way, which is spelling, and students really need to learn to spell because you guys use it a lot in English.
Yeah, because even you have students who are like high level and they'll still get mixed up between A, E and I. Like, forget it. You can see them going A, B, C, D, E in their heads, and so spelling out a word rather than writing it
I would say so.
Is the perfect way. Because it's easy at the end of the day, I guess, just to write it.
It's easier. That's why we do it. But is it the best way for the student? Because on the phone, imagine someone is talking on the phone and they're telling their surname, you don't get it, so they definitely need to spell it to you. They cannot write it, so there are alternatives to the
and it's true, that's something I've started doing more and more actually in classes. I realized a few months ago that actually maybe I was writing a little bit too much, and started just spelling it out
I
to
think
the
that
students
helps their pronunciation as well. Apart from spelling.
Well, reading is more reading. For me, pronunciation is reading. Reading. Because it's more interactive, and I can fix their pronunciation on the spot and repeat and continue. So,
I think no, with the spelling point, I think we have to be careful. Spelling's great, but we have to remember how we learned to spell as well as kids. And I find the alphabet exceptionally annoying when trying to teach people English because it doesn't sound like it sounds when it's spoken. So, when you're a kid, you would be like, So I always do that. It's because it's how we got taught as kids. So when I'm spelling something, I try and do a little mix of both.
I'll try that next class.
Because I find it really difficult.
Okay, this is a question from Elizabeth. So what arguments can we give our students to convince them that our method is more effective to learn English than the traditional ones? Especially if you have a student who has learned the traditional way for a very, very long time. What are the best arguments?
Well, I always students come to me with books they purchase. They They come with those books. Some of them are very thin, some of them are very big. And they say, okay, here, teach me. And I said, well, how long have you had these books? And normally it's 5, 10 years, 20 years. And you open the book, and the book is brand new. Never used. So to me, that is a perfect example of this is not working for you, close the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends on the situation, but hey, we have different examples based on
Yeah.
each student experience.
I
I would
think
say-
it's the pragmatic part.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go,
I think
Graham.
pragmatics is lacking in the class. So you can learn everything theory-wise, but then do you know how it works in context? That's what I really like to, because I don't disagree. I disagree that the classic method should be abandoned. I think it's step 2. I always think the first thing you should do is show them pragmatic examples in context and let them try and work it out. And if they can't work it out, then you do a little bit of the formulaic stuff that they like, just to reinforce it. You know what I mean?
In any case, I will go back to what Rob mentioned earlier about the way, there are 2 ways of approaching education. So one is based on, I'm going to provide content, I'm going to ask you to learn it and memorize it, and I'm going to test you on it, or I'm going to give you some building blocks and work on you learning through associations and through practice, which is you all seem to agree on that's the most important part. Practice and practice. So if Elizabeth students have been learning or trying to learn English for many years and the results are poor, then the least that they can do, or the minimum they can do, is try something new. Why not? Just change the approach. Change the approach and give priority to practice and to learning to learn eventually. Learning is easy. Learning is not uncomfortable. I definitely believe so.
And why we've gone back to the uncomfortable thing, Dan has asked a question about so sometimes, the problem of the students is that they think about their school days and this uncomfortable thing. So how can we help a student disassociate education with their school experience?
Oh, yeah, excellent question.
It is a very good question.
Actually.
I like that one. It's I mean, it depends how
Well,
traumatic their school days were, but
well, I think we need to focus on results. No,
yeah.
I have a number of students that they say, I've been learning English for 20 years or 10 years or 15 years, and I haven't learned a word. I just know the basic things, and I know, and languages is very hard. And I hear that every other student is, language is very hard and never going to learn. And it's because of the methods they've been using in the past, that hasn't worked. The books, the tests, the exams. And so having them be able to form sentences and think in English with our method is the result that they can actually see and talk about.
Yeah. So you would tell the student to answer this question just to forget.
No,
just try this new method. Come something you've
try
never tried, a
and-
new method, and yeah.
And see the results.
Yeah. And I was in a class yesterday, and I hadn't seen that class because unlike you guys, I changed classes, so I work on a rotation with other teachers. But I haven't seen that class in sort of maybe May, June time, and I noticed the progression. Maybe they didn't feel it, and they were like, we're not progressing, but I was shocked at how the difference, because it was incredible.
Yeah.
And so that as well is a good way to measure.
Right, and another way to measure is the students measure themselves in the way, I was speaking with my friend from United States or from Britain, and he says, suddenly I can speak better, and they understand me better, and I know what they're saying, I can understand. And to me, or they say to me, I can actually understand when you speak to me. And to me, that's progress.
Of course.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah. And I think sometimes students are quite harsh on themselves, right?
Yes,
They're quite
yes,
strict.
yes.
They want to be able to speak incredibly well in 2 weeks, and it's not going to happen, obviously. So I think they have to sort of be less harsh on themselves, less hard on themselves, give themselves a break, and it'll come.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Excellent.
Lots
Anything
of
else?
comments,
Yeah?
millions of comments actually today,
Let's
which
go
is
for
cool.
them.
But I'm gonna. There's a couple of similar ones here, so I'm gonna group a couple of people
Yeah.
together, and it was about sort of the traditional experience, and yeah, it's all the same thing, kind of like in a room, teacher at the front. Autumn's made a very good point about when some teachers are very stressed out. You know, in the US, growing up, a lot of teachers became focused about passing the state tests so the school could get the funding instead of actually teaching the material. So
Yeah.
so teachers in schools and high schools, etc., kind of she said the focus is changed on teaching rather than just the pressure of having to pass
Definitely.
the exams.
Evidence, evidence, evidence.
Yeah.
All the time.
What about? Well, we got one here from Catherine who said, "What are the difficulties with our method? With this method?" She said. So I presume it's
Well,
ours.
we were talking about motivation, no, and it's the motivation of the student to learn. And why do they need to learn? I think that's the difficulty. If anything, it's why do they want to learn English? Is it for because their parents make them
Yeah,
learn?
sometimes. Yes.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Or their companies make them so, or do they want to travel, do they want to advance in their career? So the difficulty really is the motivation, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the motivation. And I like the students who want to learn because they want to travel, because I know they're interested and they want to do they will do the reviews, and they will focus on the language.
But you know, I sometimes believe that students lack motivation because of what you mentioned earlier. They think it's their fault that they're not learning. They think that they have a problem not being good at English, and this is wrong.
Yeah.
This is, yes, it is the first difficulty that we have to face, but giving them a chance to try something different, to see how enjoyable it can be, to see that learning happens no matter what, is the best way to fight it. So we need to,
No, sorry, I think it's only natural, because if I put myself also in the position of learning Spanish, some points I think, I'm learning loads, and progress is coming, and then maybe 2 weeks later I can't see, and I just and I feel like, I can't, I'm not learning anything, I'm making no progress. It's just part of the natural learning, and I think being that we've all either done it or going through it with another language, learning another language, and so I think we can sympathize with them as well.
Yeah. Hi, I was just thinking about Catherine's way of doing things, and I guess that the difficulty comes from the teacher's point is that we're not taking a role of power like there is in school. So the students aren't doing homework. They're not coming along thinking they have to impress you like in school, and we don't have them motivated in that way. And I guess it's finding the way as teachers to motivate them themselves and give them the motivation. I often use that 5,000 hours to learn a language to scare the bejesus out of them, and to encourage them to do things on their own rather than me telling them. Or I use SWOT analysis as well. I'll do a SWOT analysis with someone in a company to see what the advantage is for them of learning English. Because I think that is some of the problems I've come across teaching is they're not as motivated as they would be in a school because there's no punishment. Do you understand what I mean?
So you got to start punishing your students. Is the conclusion of today now? No. Why is it, Ben's asked a question, why is it that schools insist on repetition and memorizing instead of the practical use? We've said that they're kind of moving away from that slowly, but why has it been so long?
Because of the testing.
It's easier.
That's the main thing, right?
Because of testing, yeah.
Yeah, and it's easier.
Yeah, you can do that. You can stand in the front of a class that you can't do it with. That's the best. That's the only reason.
I think someone has to show the teachers and also the students that there is an alternative.
Yeah.
I think that the more people are aware of it, the more people will embrace it actually. And we can tell that all our students are absolutely convinced that that's the way.
Yeah.
They've learned English eventually.
Yeah, perfect. I have one more question just for you, Carlos.
For me,
From the Madrid team, what do you think about PowerPoint?
I love PowerPoint.
We were having a talk. We saw the question before, and we were having a talk about it, and we found out.
We talk about context. No, what about PowerPoint? I love PowerPoint.
You just like designing.
I love designing.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sorry, all the nice fellows. So.
Well, PowerPoint is yet another tool that teachers can use, obviously, to illustrate their examples. And but PowerPoint is again something that, it's traditionally related to education, but we have new tools.
Yeah.
So PowerPoint is fine, but there's.
I have my iPad and I love to draw.
That's why you love PowerPoint.
I love drawing. And people learn. And we talk about your.
If you enjoy, I'm absolutely convinced people learn.
Yes, they're learning. I'm having fun. But you say
learning how to draw.
Exactly. You say you have that teacher, actor. He's an acting. No, I act a lot of words, and I'm having fun. And it's great to do that. So you can use PowerPoint or act silly, which is what I do a lot.
But then it comes back to kind of TPR, no? Like if you're associating that action with that word and the whole that connection and
If I were to choose, I would choose TPR.
I like TPR.
Definitely.
I really like it. I think it's brilliant. And in fact, I think I learned a lot of the time like that as well.
Yeah, I think we have no more time.
No,
a lot of questions though. So I'm going to pose them all so that we don't miss anything. But that was great. So the good news is that learning happens, and with us, it happens faster. So and better. We can say we provide a better student experience if I can recap that way.
Yeah.
In any case, thank you guys. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Rob.
Cheers.
Thank you, Carlos. And I will see you. We'll be back next Friday at 12 sharp.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.